leadership and a GCC executive perspective. I welcome you. It's a wonderful Thursday here in UAE in Dubai. I hope it is a wonderful day where you are. This is a very interesting topic. I hope that you like it. We do talk about leadership. We also talk about leadership from a GCC perspective. So keep that in mind. The GCC is a very big economic bloc. So we like to speak about leadership from that perspective. I hope that the slides that I'm going to provide you will help you understand more about what kind of leadership we need in this region. Some of the topics are quite generic, so if you are interested in leadership, you will find out that you can also apply these skills in your current job as well. So it's not 100% specific to GCC. It has some generic flavor as well. This way you can take something with you and benefit from it because leadership is leadership. However, I like to share with you some of how the leadership in the GCC is impacted. So here we go. My name is Jamal Saeed. I'm a partner with Meirc Training and Consulting. Allow me to give you just a very quick view of what the company is all about. One thing for sure is that Meirc is celebrating 60 years, and this is not a small feat. This is a fantastic accomplishment to exist for 60 years in this region. 60 years back, not too many companies existed, not too many countries even existed. So to be 60 years old, at least we can claim that we saw a lot of development, a lot of progress in this region, and we are very familiar with it. We observed many of the leadership styles that took place in this region. Some of it is phenomenal, some of it is great, and of course, I'm talking from a business perspective. Meirc was founded in 1958. On the other side, you have Plus, which we established in 2014. So Meirc is growing. We're trying to cater to the needs of the region on many fronts. Let me share with you what the company stands for. Basically, the name of the company now stands for the values of the company. So as you can see, mastery of the content, excellence in what we do, innovation, reliability, and client centricity. Our vision is to be the trusted partner, your most trusted partner in developing excellence for generations to come. And of course, with anything that we do, there's lots of passion. We're very passionate about developing people. And here's our mission. I'm not going to go through it in full detail, but nonetheless, please remember that we are very, very passionate about how we serve our clients. We always make sure that we work on the principle of trust. We also try to innovate, and we try to make Meirc a wonderful place to work. In the next slide, this is just a quick view of the things of the programs or the courses we deliver. So these are the different portfolios. As you can see, you have several portfolios from oil and gas to leadership and management to you can say legal to certified training, human resources, women-only courses. So we have a very rich portfolio. And please always visit our website, talk to our people, chat with them, follow our website, make sure that you find, always look things up and see what you need for your development. In case the website does not answer your need, call us, let us know how we can help you, and we'll be more than happy to talk and even develop some development plan for you and for your career. Today, it's very important that you develop, and this is something that is linked to leadership. Leaders develop themselves. So I always mention in my webinars that you have the primary responsibility to develop yourself, and that's very, very critical. And that requires leadership. And this means that if you know what you need, you know what to focus on, then you start putting a plan on what are the things that you need to develop on to become very good at your job. What do you want to cover in this webinar? We want to cover a few things, but first of all, let me give you a brief background. I'm not going to talk too much about myself. For those of you who have been with us, welcome. We welcome you again. And for those who are with us for the first time, We welcome you and we hope to see you on a regular basis with us. With respect to myself, as I mentioned, I'm a partner with Meirc, but I have you can say, an interesting background in terms of the companies I worked for. So I worked for Pepsi Cola in the region. I worked for Sun Microsystems in the region. I worked for Cisco in the region. So as you can see, when I put this program together, I took into perspective the different leadership that I have met and had the privilege to work for over the years in this region. So I worked with many leading regional companies, local companies, GCC-based companies, and all of them I learned from, and I observed their leadership style. So I hope that I can bring onto you and share with you some of that insight. What do we want to accomplish? Here are a few things. We like to evaluate personal leadership capabilities. It's very important that you look at yourself. So this is what I call the inward view. So we look at yourself, because it's important as you develop your leadership skills, you start the journey with yourself. And then of course we look at the outward. So we look at your leadership and how you engage with your environment. And then of course the third objective here is, how do we make sure that you create value? Because it's important that in your leadership role, you create value and you are able to explain value to your organization. Excuse me. And then of course, we like to understand working with change. And as you know, change is something, change today has become something very, very normal in our life. It is part of our life. It has always been, but now it has accelerated. It's like almost every day we see change. And then the last one is, what kind of leadership agenda should you have as a leader in this environment, in the GCC? What would you like to have on your agenda? So here we go. The inward perspective is what I would like to focus on right now. And to do that, I like to ask you a question. Okay? So here comes the first question. I'm going to share with you the question, and then I'm going to ask you to answer the question. So the first question is there a GCC business leadership style, true or false? So here we go. Let's see if you can answer this one. All right. Okay, so we have two questions, so two answers. Here we go. I'm going to now share with you the answers, and one person answered yes, one person answered false. So I'm going to share the results with you, and as you can see, the answer to this one, well, in many ways, it's between true and false. So it's a bit tricky, so I'm sorry for that. But is there a GCC business leadership? To some extent, there is. Okay. Now, leadership, we can say that there is a style that differentiates this part of the world, and I'll tell you why, and I will tell you the background for it. However, it doesn't mean that we haven't been impacted by leadership from other parts of the world. And of course, we, in many ways, we are impacted by leadership from the United States, from Europe, but in many ways, over the past 15, 20 years, this region has developed its own leadership skills in many ways, which is very, very exciting, by the way. Now, how does leadership look from a GC perspective? Here we go. So some definitions of leadership that I'd like to share with you. Maybe you will define leadership as a process of influencing people to voluntarily, direct their efforts toward particular goals. This is from Kevin Cruz. Very interesting fellow, very interesting. He's an entrepreneur. He has invested and created many companies, and he has won many awards. Another definition is, the only definition of a leader is someone who has followers. Peter Drucker, he is very much a guru and a father of many concepts in management and consultancy, and he's an educator and author. And as you can see, that could be two different schools. So leadership doesn't have one definition. Many people look at leadership from different perspectives. But one thing for sure is that leadership is very special. In my book, if leadership is right and if leadership is capable, then the outcomes are going to be just fantastic. I think leadership is what makes things move forward. You may disagree with me. I fully respect that one. But from my experience, leadership is extremely, extremely paramount. Now, here comes a couple of things. So, leadership and the mindset and self-awareness. So we have some interesting points of view. Sheikh Muhammad, Sheikh Ahmed bin Saeed, for example, he already mentions in many forums that there are many brilliant and respected business leaders in the market today and in the GCC, to be more specific. And that's so true. So if we look around in the different countries of the GCC, many exciting leaders have come out, and this is something that we see on a regular basis. And of course, he is the CEO of Aramex, a company that was established about 25 years back. Very exciting company. Aramex is something that has to do with the overnight delivery. So the leader here did a fantastic job. But nonetheless, if we would like to say what kind of leadership are we looking for when we look at the GCC region? Well, there are different styles. As you can see, we have many women and many professional ladies and men who are leading in this area, and they have many different mindsites. What you have in front of you are leaders from the government, leaders from airlines, leaders from telco, leaders from the mining industry, social media leaders. So the region is delivering on many fronts. So, however, what kind of mindset does a leader need? One of the key things, because it is an inward perspective goal, one of the key things that as a leader, you need to understand a couple of things. In order to accomplish great things, you have to focus on your own contribution and connect the bigger picture. However, that's not enough. Your mindset and leadership awareness also requires that you accomplish exceptional outcomes by focusing on the team members as well. So these two elements are very, very critical when we talk about mindset of a leader and self-awareness. And that's why any leader should enjoy these things. Your ability to focus on how your contributions deliver the value and how you connect the big picture, as well as how you make sure that you are focusing and delivering exceptional results by focusing on the team. Now, that being said, look how we usually spend our time. And that is why this survey is very important, because this survey that I just talked about, I'm just going to go back one step here. This is the international, as you can see here. So this survey divides the attention, how you spend your time as a leader. And as you can see, two topmost ones are sense of purpose. Do you understand how you're going to deliver your goals? Do you have a goal-oriented mindset as a leader? And the other one is focusing on others. So between the sense of purpose and other people, we already have close to 49%. Of course, you have the positive outlook, you have the evolution, all of these things are there. But these two big ones right over here, these two big ones are very, very, very critical for you to succeed as a leader. Now, that being said, okay, from a leadership and self-awareness perspective, you should be able to ask yourself some questions. Are you willing to take time to release control to your subordinates? You see, one of the key things about leadership today is empowering people, delegating to people, because if you want to achieve big results, you should be able to do that. The second question is, do I believe there will be a positive results from this release? If you don't believe, then you're not going to let go. That is why, as a leader, it's very important that you let go of certain things and you delegate, but you delegate properly. The third thing is, from your perspective, do you believe leadership is for everyone? If you don't believe leadership is for everyone, you won't be able to let go. And it's very important that you understand this concept. And then, of course, another question you need to ask yourself, am I open to the possibility that leadership is a choice and is available to everyone? For example, if somebody comes to you and says, listen, I'd like to explore some leadership skills. Would you say, no, you're not entitled for it? Or are you open to develop people? You see, this is very important here. And then the fifth question you should always ask, how do my choices influence leadership opportunities for my employees in my organization or workplace? Are you willing to open leadership possibilities for your people? And then, of course, how can I intentionally unleash potential in my employees by creating opportunities for leadership? And you see, when we talk about leadership from that perspective, we're not talking about everybody becoming a director and everybody becoming a leader, but thinking as a leader and acting as a leader. And then, of course, the last question that we always like people to ask, and those who join us on these courses, we always like to ask them the following questions. How will my efforts empower employees to lead themselves, their own responsibilities and tasks? So if you always ask yourself these 7 questions. These are very opening questions, because they tell you if you are ready to let go, develop people, empower people, and these are the foundations of organizations today. Now, that being said, your mindset is very important. And to do that, you have to make sure that you look at your personal competence and you look at your social competence. And this is what we talk about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence starts with yourself. And as you can see, the title of this module here is the inward focus. We are focusing on you. You are focusing on yourself. This means that who am I? What kind of competence do I need to become a good leader? Once you become very good at leadership and you know who you are, you can move from to the social competence. So social competence means influencing others. And as you can see, if we go back to Kevin Cruz, he said leadership is about influencing. So it is very important that you understand yourself, your skills, your weaknesses, how you develop yourself, and later on start influencing others. So when we talk about personal competence, are you aware of yourself? Do you regulate yourself? And do you motivate yourself? You see, these are very important components of self-awareness, inward focus. And then from there, what we need to do also is ask ourselves from a social perspective. Are you socially aware? And do you have the social skills to also be a very good influencer? This is extremely important, because once you do that, you start influencing the environment around you. So when we look at the GCC, there are certain things that help us understand, is there a leadership style that kind of characterizes the leaders who come out from this region? In many ways, it is true. First of all, GCC has its own history. The place has a very, very interesting history. It has its own culture, and it has its own religion. Now, what's interesting about it is that many people would argue, are leaders born or made? What do you think? Are leaders born or made? Let me see. Can you give me some feedback? Let me hear from you. Are leaders born or made? What do you think? I see Maharuf is typing something for me. He said it's made. Well, that's interesting. Let's see if somebody else would like to participate and share with us their input. Okay. Well, Maruf, you are right. Okay, in many ways they are made, and Jacqueline also is saying that they are made. So well done to both of you. Leaders are made, and as much as we might say that leaders are born like leaders, in reality the history, the culture, the religion, and the experience of the whole place is what makes leaders. And this is something that has been proven over and over again. So let's look at these 3 factors and understand how can these drive a GCC leadership style. When we look at the GCC, there are several influencing factors that help leadership style develop. One of them is people in the GCC, especially in this part of the world, they like to build lasting relationships. To them, relationships is very important. And this is extremely critical. And I felt it every time I met with leaders, they like this special thing about building relationships. The second thing is that they have some creative, bold visions. Man, I tell you, whenever I drive in the streets of Dubai or Abu Dhabi, or whenever I go through Riyadh, or whenever I go to Oman, you have some bold visions that you don't see everywhere these days. So these are some fantastic bold visions that we have today. Second, the family. We usually lead the business as from a family business perspective, and that is very critical. And I will share with you some slides where it really manifests this particular point, the family business aspect. So we usually deal with the business from a family perspective. Second, treasuring time. Now, you might say, Jamal, come on, give me a break. In many ways, traditionally, time has been very critical. But unfortunately, I'm not going to judge treasuring time from the behavior of some people. And of course, we have honoring responsibilities. This is very critical. continuously adapting. Oh my goodness, God knows how much we adapt in this region. And then trading with respect. That's very true. Most of this region of the GCC, they have been traders, and they have been trading with India, Pakistan, Iran. They have been trading with the Far East. They have been trading with East Africa. So trading with respect is very, very important. And then, of course, being the best. And I'm not saying this out of, just thinking about it. There has been many research that has been conducted, and these things always come out. Okay? So now, when it comes to a GCC leader, there are certain competencies that we like to see. So I'd like to ask you a question. From your perspective, what's a competency? Have you ever thought about the competency? What are the elements of a competency? What are the different types of competencies? And what are leadership competencies? So when we look at GCC leaders, these things are extremely, extremely important. So let me share with you the first question. Whenever we talk about a competency, we talk about three things. We talk about the skills, we talk about the knowledge, and we talk about attitude. This is critical in any competency you want to develop. Why? Because the skills means the physical domain, and it relates to your ability to do something. And then we talk about knowledge is relates to the information, your cognitive domain. But attitude to me is everything. And if you have heard me in previous seminars or webinars, I always stress attitude because it relates to your qualitative aspects, your personal characteristics and traits. And this takes us back to your personal view. How do you think as a mindset? Internally and externally, how do you think about things? So this is why competency is extremely, extremely important. And always remember that competency is made up of three things: skills, knowledge, and attitude, with a major, major stress on attitude. So when we talk about competencies of a leader, especially in the GCC, we talk about behavioral competencies and functional competencies. Behavioral competencies, what does it mean? This means that your soft competencies, and that's where building relationship comes in. That's where leading the business with the family comes in. So this is how we behave sometimes in this part of the world. Functional competencies refer to the technical skills, like are you good in finance? Are you good in mechanical engineering? Are you good in oil and gas business? So these are the functional competencies, but behavioral competencies are extremely important, and both of them are needed in your job. So it's very important to remember that these competencies are critical for your job for you to succeed in your job. Okay. Now, one thing that I always mention in leadership courses that I give is that there's something called ethical leadership. So I'd like to ask you a question. Here comes the second question, okay? So be ready to answer it. You can be a leader without strong ethical code. Is that correct? Let's see. You can be a leader without strong ethical code. We have one answer. Let's see if somebody else would like to participate. Okay. Very good. I'll give everybody a chance. I know that sometimes, so Jacqueline is saying, yes, a leader without strong ethical code, although it is wrong. Okay, so thank you, Jacqueline. That's a very interesting question. So let me just very quickly end the voting here. I know the participation is a little bit low today, but let me share with you, this is the result. So we have 1 of 4, but that's not bad. Jacqueline, I want to congratulate you. This is a very, very good reply. As a matter of fact, yes, you can be a leader without an ethical code, but it is wrong. And that it only shows in terms of the outcomes, right? The outcomes will be very, very bad. At the end of the day, leadership can take different forms, but the best thing is ethical leadership. So when we talk about ethical leadership, please always remember the following, that it is the foundation of true and productive and high performance and high result leadership. Now, so what is leadership? What is ethical leadership? It can be situational ethics. You are in a situation and you have to decide whether it is right or wrong. It can be cultural relativism. This means that you can look at ethics from a culture perspective. If you are in Europe, for example, you look at ethics from that culture. And if you are working in the GCC, you look at ethics from your culture point of view. Sometimes professional ethics, isn't that interesting? Also, in your workplace, you decide on certain ethical standard, and then value-based ethics, based on your values. How do you decide on things, whether they are right or wrong? And then you have rule-based ethics. For example, if your boss says don't be late and you are late, they will call it ethically that you are late or you are lazy or something like that. And if you always show up on time, ethically they say you are disciplined and you are good. And then of course you have ethics based on fairness. And fairness is a very interesting topic because many people relate ethical standard with fairness. Is my boss fair? Is he treating me well? Is she kind to me? So all of these things come to mind. And of course, ethics that's based on a set of coherent, generally accepted principles. And that's what we call universal ethics. This is where different cultures agree on certain standards. So ethics is very important. But nonetheless, ethical standards are critical for the job of a leader. In the GCC, it's very critical. And as you know, religion is one of the things which is a background for some many leaders. And that is why sometimes we mix between the ethical, professional ethics and the religious ethic of the workplace. But nonetheless, ethical leadership has to be something that we need to look at and adhere to in many ways. In this case, for example, one of the tests that I always like to tell people, if you are not sure about ethics, always ask yourself the following. And this is based on Patricia Pinnell and Shirley Egan. Both of them, they developed 4 sets of questions to check whether you are having some ethical questions or you have a decision to make. The first one, if your kid is over your shoulder, will you do it? You see, it's called kid on your shoulder question. So if you're not sure of it, ask yourself, if my kid is there, would I do it? How would I behave in front of my kid? The second thing is front page question. For example, would whatever I do or decide on or decision, ethical standard I decide on, would it be front page news? This means that if I do something wrong, would people talk about us? The third thing is, okay, golden rule question. Golden rule means that, are you breaking any of the golden rules that has to do with the ethical standards? And the fourth one is rule universality question. And this is where I'm talking about, in the common good of things, okay? If you break that rule, would it make any impact on your business, whether you are cheating a customer, whether you are trying to apply some unethical standards? All of these things are interesting ones. So Patricia Pinnell and Shirley Egan are very smart when they put these 4 questions in front of a leader, and always ask yourself, how would I look at things if I apply these questions there? Now, moving on. Ethical leadership has 2 elements. One is acting and making decisions ethically, and then leading ethically. And sometimes in leadership courses, the ethical side of things is not covered very well. And that is why in my courses, I stress on this one, because we need more ethical leadership more today than ever before. And this means that whenever we talk about these things, you also have a kind of a model. For example, why practice ethical leadership? Well, in many ways, it gives you a model of ethical behavior. Ethical leadership builds trust. It brings credibility and respect. It also leads to collaboration. It creates good climate within the organization, allows to occupy the high moral ground always, and it also affords self-respect. So nothing bad comes out of ethical leadership. As a matter of fact, with ethical leadership, I can sleep comfortably at night. Now, some of the most important components of ethical leadership is the ability to put aside your ego and personal interest, the willingness to encourage and take seriously feedback, encouragement of leadership in others, maintaining and expanding leadership competence, accepting responsibility, understanding the power of leadership and using it well. Now, one of the leaders who has impressed me and left a huge impression on me is Sheikh Zayed, who was the president of this country, the United Arab Emirates. And Sheikh Zayed was very humble, extremely humble in his approach. And he has, interesting enough, even though he had some political leadership, but he was also a smart businessman. I mean, he's the one who built this country at the end of the day. And many leaders who came out from this country and neighboring countries, whether in Saudi Arabia or Oman or Bahrain or other countries, you can see that there is this interesting, humble nature of the leaders who really succeed. Okay, so ethical leadership is very important, and humbleness is an important part of that ethical leadership. Now, outward perspective. So we talked a little bit about the inward perspective, You should be able to be self-aware. You should be able to criticize yourself. You should be able to, you should be aware of your competencies. But what's outward perspective? Outward perspective means a couple of things. One of them is impacting others, impacting the environment around you. But before I do that, let me ask you the following questions. Uncertainty, innovation, global competition, and unfair practices, clarity about where to most fruitfully invest, and market volatility are things that leaders worry about today. True or false? So I'm going to give you the survey. Here we go. Let me know what you think. All right. So we will give. So Jacqueline is saying true. Jacqueline, you can answer and participate with the answers online as well. When I display the survey, you can answer these things. So the ending the vote, I'm going to share the information. The question is true. These things, these items are actually keeping leaders awake these days. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to stop the sharing. I'm going to go to the slide. Based on a number of surveys, some of them based on Wall Street Journal, which was published in 2014, the job of the CEO is not getting any easier, and we know that. And the CEO is a leader in many ways, and leaders are all over the place, particularly in this part of the world. So here are some of the results of the surveys. Based on this survey, Tim Paolenti from the Financial Services Roundtable, he's the CEO of the Financial Services Roundtable, he said, you know what? Disruptions caused by innovations, team members' excellence in rapidly changing modern environment, government compliance, work-life balance. This is becoming very, very important aspects for leadership today. And this is what we call the view from the top. So as you take a leadership role, certain things start taking more priorities. Another one is from Rosabeth Moscanter. And as you can see, as a professor, a leader in the business of leadership and management, she mentions that uncertainty, innovation, global competition, clarity about where to mostly fruitfully invest, market volatility are becoming the things that people, especially leaders, worry about today. So when they occupy this high level or high position, they start worrying about these things. So it's very important to remember that going to the top and assuming a top position, the priorities would change for you. And the same thing is with Jay Hooley, President and Chief Executive of State Street Corporation. When he replied to the survey, he said, finding and retaining the best talent, making technology a competitive advantage, positioning yourself in a global market, developing the right corporate culture, all of these things are keeping the leaders awake at night. How do you stay competitive? So what does this mean for a leader? So we are now focusing outward. When you are focusing outward, I know myself, but one of the key things is when you are focusing outward, you have to engage the organization. Engaging the organization is very important. Every organization should operate with a defined organizational structure. So building the structure is very important for you because the way that it works, if the structure is good, you will be able to engage people very, very well. So what does it mean to engage the organization? One of the key things is you have to build a very important, you have to build a very dynamic organizational structure that can respond to the needs of the business. Now, here are some organizational structures that are very, very popular today. The matrix organization, many companies apply this. It's a difficult one, but if it works well, you can eliminate many silos and many walls. You have also the functional organizational structure. This is also very important based on the function of the organization. You also have the product organization, the customer organization structure, and the geographic organization structure. Each one of these things serves a purpose, but at the end of the day, your choice of the structure will help you engage the organization better. So remember, beyond the organizational structure, engaging the employee is extremely important. And this is one of the biggest company challenges that CEOs face today. Why? Because you want to make sure that at the end of the day, you're getting the best productivity out of your people. So what does it mean to engage organization? First of all, you have to inform them. This is very critical. Inform your employees of what's going on. Consult them. This is also very, very important. Involving others, this is also very important. Collaborate, this is another thing that you need to work in your organization. And then empower. As you can see, these 5 areas are extremely important. So this is how engaging the employees takes these forms. Now, in addition to that, okay, research shows that there are 5 leadership skills that increase engagement in the workplace. You have to work on building trust, you have to mentor, you have to include, align the resources, and make sure you develop team development. Make sure that you focus on team development. So in addition to engaging your employees, you also want to make sure that your leadership skills toward when you're working outward, these are the things that you are focusing on. Then when you, in addition to the employees, you also have to interact with the market today, and this also requires that you have different set of skills than those before. You have to work with the market and understand what's going on. And what's interesting is that 9 key criteria has been highlighted by Salesforce.com, saying that top leaders today, they have to engage team, they have to make sure that they work as a team, they also have to integrate the customer experience, they have to understand the customer experience, they have to adopt technology, they have to make sure that they understand how mobility operate, they have to make sure that their work with the channel business and how they operate with their representative in the market is very, very good. They also have to align with market business leadership. They also have to make sure that they use intelligent email in order to generate more higher revenue. They want to make sure that social media, okay, sees a massive return on investment. And of course, advertising in social media has to be well articulated. So these things did not exist a few years back, guys. So this is very important that today, the leadership, the CEOs who are working outwardly, looking outwardly, they have to understand that these important aspects of leadership have to come out. It's no longer the traditional way of thinking, it is different way of thinking. So what does it mean? This means that you have to listen to your customers, you have to analyze their feedback, you have to plan your engagement, and you have to speak and reach out. So as you can see, listening and building relationship is more important than ever, and you have to do it on a regular basis. So that being said, this means also you have to build partnership and alliances and make sure that you are leveraging them in a very big way. One thing about the GCC, because this particular webinar is about the GCC leaders, this particular word is extremely important here. Partnership and alliances are an important part of this region. And as you can see, if you operate here or if you work here, there are lots of partnerships between foreign companies and local companies, and alliances between foreign companies and local companies. So this is an extremely important part of leadership and how leaders operate here. So, and it has been the foundation of the growth of this region in many ways. That being said, it also, you have to remember competition. So thinking outwardly means that you have to deal with competition on a regular basis. You have to understand what competition is all about, and you have to make sure that when you are dealing with competition, you are on top of things and you are challenging the right way. So what does it mean to deal with competition? Basically, identify who they are, analyze your competition, know your clients, strategize against your competition, and always adjust your business accordingly. Now, when I mentioned that lots of businesses operate here in the GCC and there are lots of partnership and alliances, one of the key things about the GCC is that it has a lot of family business. So if you ignore this important aspect of the GCC mindset, you won't be able to leverage what the GCC is all about. So family business in the GCC is extremely important, and lots of family business control the economy here in this region. We have very big companies that are family based, and some of them have been running for the past 50 years or maybe more, maybe 60 years. And they are the ones who are, driving many businesses. They represent foreign companies here, and they are very solid drivers behind the economy here. So you have to understand that working within the GCC, you have to understand that you have lots of GCC family businesses, and the leaders for these businesses are also think from a family perspective. And as I told you before, that leaders in the GCC think from a family perspective. So this is very critical to understand. Now, that being said, most of the firms are less than 6 years old. Many of them began as trading companies, and as you remember, trading was an important aspect of the business here. And a lot of the businesses are run by either the first generation or the second generations, and now we are seeing more of the third generations coming in. How does the GCC business spread out? Well, they have lots of retail, they have lots of financial services, they have lots of real estate, they have lots of construction engineering, they have lots of hotels. So as you can see, the GCC family business is spread out across different elements of the economy. However, and in light of the challenges with upcoming generations, many consultants and many government entities are advising the family business to make sure that they build the proper model so that they secure continuity of the GCC business. This means that they have to somehow make sure that they create 5 dimensions of the family activity. You have the family, you have the ownership, you have the governance and the business portfolio, you have the wealth management and the foundation. So many of the family businesses are restructuring in this format so that they avoid, future conflicts between the different members and the different generations of the business. Now, that being said, and the fact that I shared with you the inward perspective and the outward perspective, now it's time to put the strategy and how to create value from the strategy. And this is very critical. So here comes the 4th question. Part of succeeding in business today, companies need to stay nimble. True or false? Let me see. So we have one answer here. That's very good. Okay. So I'm going to give everybody a chance just to answer the question. Okay. I'm going to end the voting in a couple of minutes. All right. Okay. So I'm going to share the results right. The answer is true. So well done. The thing about it is that part of succeeding in business today is you have to be nimble. And this means that you have to develop a strategy that can adjust to the changing and the fast moving changes that are taking place today. Now, as the future becomes less predictable, some believe that we have come to the end of strategy, which is a bit unfortunate. We haven't come to the end of strategy, but your strategy has to be nimble, has to be light, has to be fast changing so that you can keep up with the changes in the market or lead some of the changes in the market. So nimble companies are changing their strategy development process. They don't develop strategy in the traditional way. They are developing more of a nimble strategy that can spot shifts early and at the same time give you enough agility to seize and retain leadership roles and leadership positions. This means that when you are thinking from a nimble perspective, you have to think of the time horizons that are involved. You have to think of the thinking process within the company, and you have to think from the engagement perspective. And you remember, we talked about engaging the organizations before. So time horizons, this means that you have to look further out. At the same time, you have to make sure that your outlook is no longer looking at 15 years. Maybe you have to look at 3 and 5 years. You have to keep an eye on the further horizon, but nonetheless, it's also very prudent to keep an eye on the 3 to 5 years going forward. Thinking, how do you think about this whole thing? How do you think about the process and the strategy? How do you engage people? How do you encourage people to participate and share ideas? How do you think positively about things? What kind of mindset do you have? On the engagement front, as you can see, engaging employees is extremely important. How to engage them, how to empower them, how to make sure they are participating with the decision process. All of these things are critical dimensions of a nimble strategy. This means that when we do this, strategic planning process means that you have to assess your situation where you are. You have to make sure you design the right things in place. You have to make sure that you are building the right objectives and goals and plans in place, and then you have to manage. Now, normally in the courses that I give, I go into more detail, but for the sake of time, I just want to make sure I share with you that the strategic planning today, especially if you would like to stay nimble, you have to make sure that you follow these 4 items, from assessing to designing to building and managing. When you are looking at value, okay, it's very important that you, whichever strategy you adopt, you are looking at the value chain. And this is Michael Porter's value chain. This means that And as you can see, you have at the bottom you have the primary functions, and at the top you have the support functions over here, as you can see. Now, whenever you add value, ask yourself, in the inbound logistics, how can I add value? Inbound means that what are you bringing to your company? Operations, how are you cooking the stuff? How are you putting them together? Outbound is the product that you produce. Marketing and sales is how do you sell your products, and service is how do you service your customers. But in addition to this primary functions, you also have procurement, technology, you have human resources, and firm infrastructure. The question here is, for each one, whether it is a primary or support function, what can you do to add value? And remember this formula over here. Value add less cost is equal profit margin. This means that the value change, you have to think of how to cut cost and how to increase your revenue. So you as a participant in your company, always make sure to ask these questions. How can I add value to my company? Okay, and that's what leaders should do. They should always look at ways of how to adding value to the organization. At the same time, when you are um, dealing with these adding value, you understand the money figures. You have to speak the money language. And to speak the money language, you have to understand that, what goes into the income statement, what goes into the balance sheet, what is owner's equity at the end of the day, because these are the people who own part of your company. And at the same time, what are cash flows? Okay, how to manage the cash flows of the company and make sure that your company is always afloat and it's not sinking or going into debt. And that being said, since cash flow is very important, usually we look at the operating activities, the investing activities, and the financing activities. So whenever you pick up a cash flow statement, you will see these three things reflected, similar to what we have over here. As you can see in this chart, you have the cash flow from operations, and this is the number in this case. You have the cash flow from investing activities, you have this one over here, and then you have cash flow from financing activities, which is this one here. You add all three together and you will have a net decrease in cash, okay, a net decrease in cash. In case you have any cash at the beginning, this means that you take the negative out of the positive and you will be left with the net positive cash at the end of the year. So this is very important. And by the way, cash flow doesn't have to be looked at the end of the year. It's usually looked at, in some cases, it's looked at on a daily basis. It's looked at from a weekly basis. Sometimes it's looked at from a monthly basis. But typically, companies, when they consolidate their statements, they see these things at the end of the year. Now, that being said, you have to measure things. It's very important that you quantify things. So in addition to the money language, your KPIs should be able to help you measure things. So you as a leader in the GCC, it's very important that you understand your KPIs should speak numbers, rates, ratios, averages, and KPIs come in all different shapes and forms, and they are applied all across the business. What does it mean? This means that when we are looking at KPIs, they have to be simple and fat-free. They have a clear unit of measure. This is very critical. For example, if I am a runner, okay, I say I'm gonna run today for 3 hours, okay? This means that my distance is 3 hours. Or you might say I'm gonna run 20 kilometers. This means that my unit of measure is kilometers. So either time, you can say 3 hours, or kilometers, 20 kilometers. This means that you are measuring your progress. And then, of course, anything that you want to measure has to be linked to a result area. This way, you're adding value. And of course, everything has a formula, so make sure that your formula is done properly. It can be reported on time, it can be cost effective, and it has to be owned by one individual, and you should be able to verify the KPIs. So that being said, once you have all the KPIs, we also talk about the balance scorecard. And as you know, the balance scorecard is a very, very important element here. The balance scorecard is normally divided into 4 items. First of all, you have the organizational capacity, or sometimes we call it learning and growth. Sometimes it's called the second one is the internal processes. You can call it operations. This is where things are being put together. And then you have the customer. This is where the customer is dealing with the operations. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you have a website and you develop a very nice website. That falls in the internal process. When the customer interacts with your website and your website is very successful, this means that the customer is happy. And this means that the customer enjoys working or dealing with the website or buying from you via the website. And then, of course, the financials. The financials means the following, that if the customer is happy, they will buy from you more. So in addition to the KPI, which is based on 4 key items, organizational capacity, internal process, customer, and financial, we also have created something here is called we call it the strategy map. What does it mean? A strategy map means that anything that you do in the organizational capacity should impact anything above it or across. So this means that if I have an initiative in, let's say that you went for a course, your boss says, listen, I need to send you on this course. This particular course should make you better, and so on and so forth. If you, because of this course, you designed a new process, this process should make the customer happy. And because the customer is happy, you're impacting the financials. So this is what we call, in many ways, the KPIs are usually the spread between leading and between leading KPIs and lagging KPIs. Leading KPIs are usually in this area over here, okay? And the lagging KPIs are in this area over here. Now, that being said, there are other tools that GCC leaders should enjoy, and I encourage them to invest in. One of them is customer relationship management. This is very important today. It has been around for some time, by the way. This is not something new, but I get surprised sometimes when a business is running without a customer relationship management. Customer relationship management is extremely important to capture, to understand who your customers are. The second thing is benchmarking. You should always bench your mark against competition. Employee engagement surveys. You should always conduct surveys to see if your employees are engaged or not. Strategic planning. Extremely important when it comes to strategic planning. And we already talked about, strategy and how important it is to develop a nimble strategy. Outsourcing is another important tool for GCC leaders. Balanced scorecard. We just covered it in the previous slide. Mission and vision. Supply chain, change management, and so on and so forth. Now, that being said, we move into market dynamics. And this is where I talk a little bit about the change. So any leader, especially in the GCC, you have to deal with the market dynamics, with the change. So here comes my question, and this is question number 5. Leadership is about dealing with change. True or false? Let's see. Leadership is about dealing with change. True or false? Let me see. Very good. So we have now a little bit slightly better participation. Okay, so let me share with you the voting. I'm going to end the voting here and I'm going to share the voting with you. So all the answers are true. So well done. Congratulations. This is fantastic. And this is true. By the way, leadership is a lot about change, because if you don't change, you are simply a manager and you are maintaining the status quo. Leadership is about dealing with change. And this is a very tough topic today, and lots of companies are grappling with it. So please understand that change is something that presses us out of our comfort zone. It is in many ways, inequitable. Sometimes change produces inequities. Sometimes change can be for the better, and unfortunately sometimes could be for the worst. Change means adjustment, and could be over a period of time. And change could be, difficult to accept in many ways. And it could have a very tough psychological impact on many people. Because organizational change, if I want to define change management and organizational change, when we talk from that context, change is about people. So when we talk about organizational change, it is both the process in which an organization changes its structure, strategies, operational methods, organizational culture to affect change within the organization, and the effect of these changes on the organization. That is why when we talk about organizational change, it's not only the process, it's the impact of these processes on the organization, on the people. And that is why we call it change management. So always make sure that you communicate the value of the change. People want to understand, why are you doing this change? And it's very important that you have a very strong mechanism in place. Now, when we talk about change, normally we encourage people to always stay active and visible, always seek participation, always make sure that communication is always direct, and make sure that you build the right coalitions. Coalitions mean build the right teams. And that's something we encourage companies in the GCC and leadership in the GCC to be more proactive. From our perspective, sometimes change is not easy. And many leaders in the GCC don't understand the value of the change. So we try to maintain the status quo. As a matter of fact, the recent events, especially when it comes to the oil change, the change of the oil price, has taken many leaders by a bit of a surprise. And that has put quite an impact and pressure on the organizations. So that is why building a nimble organization, looking into the future, understanding what could happen, understanding the risks entailed with following one strategy, okay, can help the leaders build and deal with change a lot better. So here we go. One of the main reasons for organizations that they fail is that they develop complacency. So, and complacency means that they are happy with what they are, with where they are, and they don't do anything about it. And unfortunately, we have seen many companies fall into this particular trap and unfortunately hurt themselves over a period of time. Some of the companies, as a matter of fact, are out of the market due to this. So, this is why John Carter, since 1996 till today, he has been communicating change in a very big way. And he always mentions that when you are trying to drive urgency of change and you want to overcome complacency, make sure that you are listening to the customer, customer interfacing employees. This means that talk to the employees who are dealing with customers. Always use the power of videos and podcasts and the social media. Always make sure that you protect the people from troubling data. Okay, don't protect them. This means tell them what's going on because people don't like to be surprised. And then, of course, send people out. Let them go out and explore what's going on. And John Carter, in my course, when I talk about the leadership program for GCC executives, I always make sure that we apply the 7 steps, the 8 steps that John Carter talked about. And this is something I talked about in my change management webinar. So if you're interested to understand it a little bit more, please look up that webinar. But in this particular webinar, I'd just like to mention that change is an important part of any GCC leader. Now, we are coming up to the last slides, but here is a question for you. A GCC leader does not need an agenda. Is this true or false? Let's see. A GCC leader does not need an agenda. Very good. So we have one answer over here. We have 2 answers. That's very good. I'm going to end the voting and I'm going to share the voting. So both of you false, and I'm very proud of you. Fantastic. A GCC leader or any leader needs an agenda. Great leaders inspire others and they have some common traits in common. Here are the top 5 things that you must do and to become an even more effective GCC leaders. So what are they? Basically, they should be able to concerned with the health of the organization. And according to Patrick Lencioni, there are 4 key elements to drive organizational health. Now, Patrick Lencioni is a writer that I really admire. I like the way that he writes. His approach is very simple and yet very effective. He writes in a novel style, and that's what I like about his books. They are, you can say, business books, but in a very exciting style. So when it comes to the 4 key items that a business leader should focus on, first of all, they should focus on the organizational health and organizational intelligence and make sure that they are attuned to it. What does this mean? So here we are. The 4 key elements that Patrick talks about is that always make sure that you build a cohesive leadership team. That's something that in the GCC we don't see a lot of, even though over the past 5 years, I must admit, we have seen some very successful stories. As a matter of fact, specifically businesses in Dubai, and surprisingly enough, those that has to do with the government itself, they have done fantastically well in building some fantastic cohesive teams. But we like to see more of it across all businesses. Second is creating clarity. This is a very important part of a leader, is they always have to create clarity all the time. You cannot say today and not tomorrow. All the time, communicating clearly is something extremely important. And then it's not enough to create clarity. You have to over communicate it and then always reinforce the message. So this is part of the agenda. These 4 areas have to happen. And this is something that I really admire in the writing of Patrick Lencioni. because first of all, you have to build that team, and this team has to create the clarity around what the organization is all about, communicate the clarity so that everybody knows their roles and responsibilities, and always reinforce that clarity. So that being said, effective and successful decision make profit to the company, and unsuccessful one make losses. That is why when you have these 4 items that Patrick Lencioni talked about, the company becomes quite effective and the decisions are very successful. Corporate decision making process is the most critical process in any organization. So is there a particular approach to decision making? Well, here's something for you. Steps in decision making: always identify the purpose of the decision. Why am I making a decision? Always gather information. Principle for judging the alternatives means that always come up with alternatives. You always have to say, what am I deciding? So always come up with alternatives, brainstorm and analyze the different choices, evaluate the alternatives, select the best alternatives, execute, and of course, don't forget to evaluate the progress, the progress of the results or the outcome of the decision. In case the outcome or the results are not good enough, you can always go back to the other alternatives, and replace the existing decision with the another alternatives that you have identified previously. In addition to the agenda, in addition to the decision making, coaching has become very important, and we encourage GCC leaders to focus more and more on coaching. Coaching is a wonderful style. It helps people develop their abilities, it helps people develop their skills, and it gives empowerment to the people. Mentoring, the same. Mentoring is basically you take a person and you mentor them over a longer period of time than coaching. It could be a year, it could be 2 years, but mentoring is extremely important, and definitely it builds the leadership of tomorrow. Now, this is it pretty much. One more thing I like to mention: some of the books that I developed the course around. Leadership Challenge is a very good book written by Barry Posner and James Cozius. Both of them are fantastic writers. They also have leadership courses on their own. 3 levels of leadership model by James Schooler: followership, the modern firm, the culture engine, and the best practice to work. All of these wonderful books I reference in my courses. More or less, this is it. I hope you have enjoyed the webinar, and I look forward to you joining us in future workshops. Here are some dates for the webinars. One of the courses. One course is coming up between 8 and 12 of April. It's taking place in Dubai. The other one is in December, between 23rd to 27th. I hope that you can join us. If you need to stay in touch, please do so. Here's my email, and here's the website for the company. And at the bottom, we have the LinkedIn website that you can reach me at. And if you like to have a copy of this presentation, we will be more than happy to send you a copy. Just let us know, send your email to my attention, and we will take it from there. I want to thank you for the listening to us today, and I hope that you join us in future webinars. Thank you.
Meirc.com